Christianity once shaped nearly every aspect of life in the West. It built cathedrals that touched the skies, dictated laws, influenced art, and defined morality. Today, however, its influence is shrinking at a pace that would have been unthinkable just a century ago. More people than ever identify as non-religious. Churches that were once full are now being sold, converted into apartments, or left abandoned. Surveys show that in countries once called Christian nations, the majority no longer attend services, and many don't even baptize their children. This decline raises a pressing question. Why is Christianity losing ground in the very lands where it once reigned supreme? One of the most obvious reasons is access to information. For most of history, the church controlled knowledge. Ordinary people were discouraged, or even forbidden, from reading sacred texts in their own languages. Today, everyone can instantly access scientific studies, historical critiques, and philosophical discussions with a few taps on a screen. When people learn that many biblical stories resemble older myths, or that moral systems predate Christianity, the exclusive authority of the religion collapses. Knowledge no longer belongs to the pulpit, it belongs to everyone. But access to information alone doesn't explain the scale of decline. Social trust in religious institutions has collapsed after decades of scandal. Clergy once enjoyed enormous respect, but repeated revelations of abuse, financial corruption, and cover-ups have destroyed credibility. The very institutions that demanded moral authority have often failed to live by the values they preach. When leaders are caught exploiting vulnerable people, ordinary believers begin to wonder if the faith itself is flawed at its core. Generational change is another decisive factor. Studies from Pew Research Center and other institutions show that young people in the West are far less religious than older generations. They are not simply drifting away temporarily. Many never develop strong religious ties at all. Once religion loses its grip on youth, it struggles to regenerate itself. Churches can try new music styles or youth programs, but young people are raised in a world where belief is optional, not compulsory. When given the choice, they often choose independence. Education has played an enormous role in this shift. The higher the level of education, the lower the level of religious belief. Universities expose students to different cultures, histories, and philosophies. They teach critical thinking and emphasize evidence over authority. Christianity historically flourished in times when questioning the church was dangerous. In the modern classroom, questioning is not only permitted, but encouraged. Once students learn to evaluate claims using reason, they often find religious doctrines unconvincing. There is also the issue of scientific progress. The natural world was once explained through divine action. Lightning was a sign of wrath, disease was punishment, and drought was a test of faith. Today, science explains these phenomena without appeal to the supernatural. Every step forward in understanding weakens the need for God. Astronomy has shown the vastness of the universe. Biology has revealed the common ancestry of all life, and medicine has replaced prayer as the most reliable treatment for illness. As the gaps for divine intervention shrink, so does the relevance of the religion built upon it. Yet Christianity's decline is not only intellectual, it is also cultural. The West has become more diverse, and exposure to different beliefs makes people less certain that any single religion is true. A child growing up in a multicultural city sees Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, and Christians all living side by side. This diversity undermines the claim that one faith has exclusive access to truth. Religion thrives in isolation, but weakens in pluralism. Economic security also plays a role. Studies consistently show that wealthier and more secure nations are less religious. People who have access to healthcare, education, and stable governments rely less on supernatural promises. In contrast, religion thrives in contexts of poverty and uncertainty, where it offers comfort and community. As Western countries have grown more prosperous, the psychological need for religion has diminished. Faith once filled the void of insecurity. Now, social systems and science do. Another overlooked factor is the changing view of morality. For a long time, Christianity claimed to be the source of moral truth. But today, many Westerners see moral progress as happening outside the church, not within it. The abolition of slavery, the rise of women's rights, and the acceptance of LGBTQ+ people were all resisted by Christian institutions before being reluctantly embraced. Religion is increasingly seen as an obstacle to moral progress rather than its foundation. Younger generations especially associate Christianity with intolerance, which makes them less likely to adopt it as a guiding worldview. The very texts that once inspired awe now fuel skepticism. Critical scholarship has shown contradictions, historical inaccuracies, and borrowed myths in the Bible. Ordinary readers can see that there are multiple versions of the same stories, different genealogies for the same figures, and prophecies that fail to materialize. When the Bible is presented as perfect, such inconsistencies become impossible to ignore. Faith depends on reverence for the text. Once people read it critically, reverence is lost. At the same time, the modern world has shifted the focus of life. Christianity promised meaning in suffering and rewards after death. But people today increasingly demand meaning in this life, not the next. They ask why they should sacrifice joy now for promises that cannot be verified. Technology, travel, and new forms of community provide meaning outside of religious frameworks. A person can dedicate their life to art, science, or activism without ever stepping inside a church. In many ways, secular life offers more concrete meaning than Christianity's abstractions. One of the most striking reasons for decline is Christianity's inability to adapt to social change without appearing hypocritical. When moral progress forces the church to revise its stance, whether on slavery, evolution, or same-sex marriage, it undermines the claim of divine authority. If God's word was supposedly eternal, why does it always bend to cultural pressure? This inconsistency pushes people to see Christianity as a human invention rather than divine revelation. Christianity is also losing ground because its answers no longer satisfy the questions people actually ask. Ancient people asked why lightning struck or why crops failed. Today, people ask how to find purpose in a universe without clear direction, or how to live ethically in a complex world. Christianity still offers answers shaped by a tribal and agrarian past. When modern concerns are met with ancient dogma, the gap becomes too wide to bridge. Even ritual is losing appeal. Church services once provided music, art, and community. But in an era of streaming music, global art, and social media networks, those needs are fulfilled elsewhere. Churches cannot compete with the sheer abundance of cultural offerings available at people's fingertips. Ritual feels outdated when other communities provide the same sense of belonging without requiring belief in the supernatural. Another factor is the transparency of religion's origins. Scholars and historians have shown how early Christianity absorbed and adapted older pagan traditions. Holidays like Christmas and Easter borrow from pre-Christian rituals. Many doctrines were shaped by political councils rather than divine command. When people realize how much of Christianity was built through compromise and cultural borrowing, its claims of uniqueness unravel. Technology itself is reshaping belief. In the past, a doubter might have felt isolated. Today, someone questioning their faith can find entire online communities that share their doubts. They can watch debates, read critiques, and connect with others who have left religion. The internet has broken the monopoly of the local church by providing global networks of skepticism. Doubt is no longer a lonely road. It is a shared experience, Christianity's decline is not uniform, of course. Some areas still see strong evangelical movements, but even those are changing. Many evangelical churches rely on emotional spectacle, prosperity teachings, or political involvement to stay relevant. Yet these strategies often backfire, alienating thoughtful people who see them as manipulative or insincere. The louder and more politicized Christianity becomes, the more it drives moderate believers away. The link between Christianity and politics has also damaged its image. In the United States, churches often align themselves with partisan movements. This creates the impression that Christianity is not a universal truth, but a political brand. For young people especially, religion associated with political extremism feels less like a path to transcendence and more like a power struggle. Once religion is reduced to politics, it loses spiritual authority. The decline is also accelerated by demographic shifts. Immigration introduces new worldviews, and secular families raise children without religion. Unlike religious families, secular ones rarely return to faith. Each generation raised without strong religious ties accelerates the decline further. Christianity is not only losing individuals, it is losing entire family lines. Another subtle but powerful reason is the decline of fear. For centuries, Christianity relied heavily on fear of hell and divine punishment. Today, fewer people believe in eternal torment. Without fear as a motivator, religion loses one of its strongest psychological tools. A person who no longer fears hell has little reason to obey the church. Once the fear is gone, freedom feels natural. When fear weakens, people start to evaluate religion on its actual claims, rather than its threats. Once they ask whether its stories are historically accurate, whether its morals are truly good, and whether its God is even necessary, they often find that the answers are lacking. Christianity's survival depended for a long time on suppressing these questions. But in an open society, where doubt is permitted, questions flourish, and the religion cannot silence them without exposing its insecurity. Another reason for the decline is the failure of Christianity to provide unity. The religion is fractured into thousands of denominations, each claiming to follow the true interpretation. This endless division reveals the absence of clear, divine guidance. If God truly wanted to communicate a single truth, why does every group claim authority while contradicting the others? This splintering undermines the idea of a universal message and instead suggests human invention and political struggle. Christianity also faces the erosion of its sacred symbols. The cross once represented salvation and reverence. Now it often appears on jewelry, fashion, or even tattoos, stripped of religious meaning. When symbols become cultural decoration rather than sacred emblems, their power fades. A society that wears crosses as fashion but ignores church teachings has already moved beyond belief. Language itself reflects the decline. Words like sin, salvation, and redemption once carried weight in everyday life. Today, they sound archaic, foreign, or even manipulative. People no longer see their natural impulses as sinful, but as part of human diversity. Concepts once central to Christian preaching now feel disconnected from modern experience. Without resonance, these words lose their ability to inspire or control. There is also the matter of unmet promises. Christianity teaches that prayer works, that faith brings comfort, and that divine providence guides history. But when people pray and nothing happens, when tragedies strike the faithful as often as the faithless, and when injustice persists despite centuries of belief, the promises ring hollow. Disappointment builds skepticism, and skepticism weakens faith. The more people expect real-world results from religion, the more they discover its emptiness. The Western emphasis on individual freedom also contributes to Christianity's decline. Religion demands submission, obedience, and conformity. But modern culture prizes personal choice and authenticity. People are told to be themselves and pursue their own paths, which clashes with the church's demand to follow rigid rules. Christianity insists on fixed roles, especially regarding gender and sexuality, while society increasingly celebrates fluidity and autonomy. The tension between religious control and personal freedom drives many to abandon the church altogether. Historical awareness further undermines Christianity, as people learn about the violence committed in its name: crusades, inquisitions, forced conversions, colonialism. They find it harder to see the faith as a force for good. Even if modern Christians disavow these actions, the record remains. The religion's history is written not only in stained glass, but also in blood. Awareness of this past makes the church's moral claims less persuasive. The shift in attitudes towards sexuality is especially significant. Christianity has long framed sexuality as something dangerous, shameful, or in need of control. Yet modern science and culture see it as natural and healthy. The rise of LGBTQ+ rights, the acceptance of premarital relationships, and open discussions about consent and autonomy directly conflict with church teachings. Young people raised in this environment see the church as repressive rather than liberating, and so they leave. Christianity's decline is also tied to the way it approaches suffering. The church has often glorified pain, teaching that suffering has redemptive value. But modern societies focus on alleviating suffering through medicine, psychology, and social reform. People no longer want to endure pain in the hope of heavenly reward. They want to solve problems here and now. A religion that sanctifies suffering seems outdated in a world striving to reduce it. The decline is visible not only in attitudes, but also in physical spaces. Across Europe, thousands of churches stand empty. Some have been converted into restaurants, bookstores, or community centers. Others are left to crumble. These buildings once symbolized permanence and dominance. Their repurposing demonstrates a cultural shift. What was once sacred is now just real estate. The transformation of cathedrals into secular spaces is not only practical, it is symbolic of Christianity's loss of influence. Philosophy has also eroded Christianity's foundations. Thinkers from the Enlightenment onward have shown that morality, meaning, and human rights do not require divine sanction. In fact, many argue that grounding these values in reason and human experience makes them stronger than grounding them in faith. As these ideas spread through education and culture, Christianity's claim to moral necessity weakens further. People realize they can be ethical without religion, and once that realization takes hold, the faith loses its grip. Christianity's decline is not simply the rejection of one worldview, it is the rise of alternatives. Humanism, secular philosophy, and scientific naturalism offer explanations that are coherent, testable, and inclusive. While religion divides the world into believers and unbelievers, these alternatives speak to everyone. When given a choice between exclusivity and inclusivity, more people choose the latter. Christianity appears narrow and outdated compared to the openness of secular thought. Another unique factor in the West is the role of art and culture. Literature, film, and music increasingly critique or satirize religious belief. Popular culture portrays skeptical or non-religious characters as thoughtful and independent, while rigidly religious characters are often shown as hypocritical or oppressive. These depictions subtly shape public opinion. Culture once reinforced religion, now it undermines it. There is also the undeniable pull of consumer culture. While Christianity preaches simplicity and sacrifice, modern economies thrive on desire and consumption. People are encouraged to pursue careers, possessions, and experiences, rather than eternal life. The marketplace competes with the church for attention, and in most cases, it wins. Sunday mornings once belonged to worship. Now they belong to shopping, sports, or leisure. Consumerism may not offer truth, but it offers stimulation, and stimulation often feels more rewarding than sermons. Christianity is also weakened by its internal contradictions. On the one hand, it preaches love and forgiveness. On the other, it teaches eternal punishment for those who do not believe. This contradiction is harder to sustain in a society that values fairness and empathy. People ask how a loving God could damn billions of humans for honest disbelief, and they find no satisfying answer. The more Christianity insists on doctrines like eternal hell, the more it alienates those who value compassion. The rise of secular rituals further accelerates the decline. Weddings, funerals, and holidays once belonged exclusively to the church. Today, secular ceremonies provide the same functions without invoking religion. People can celebrate marriage, mourn loved ones, and honor traditions without reciting prayers or invoking deities. As secular rituals gain popularity, the church loses one of its strongest forms of cultural power. One of the most profound reasons Christianity is losing ground is its failure to provide intellectual honesty. The church often demands belief in miracles and supernatural claims without evidence. But modern minds are trained to value verification. They accept that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. When religion continues to ask for blind faith, it feels increasingly out of step with intellectual integrity. People want honesty, not dogma, and honesty rarely survives in the pews. The religion is also eroding because of its own rigidity. When confronted with modern science, many Christian leaders double down rather than adapt. They attack evolution, deny climate change, or resist medical progress. This stubbornness makes Christianity appear not only irrelevant, but actively harmful. A religion that denies evidence becomes a religion of denial, and denial cannot thrive in an evidence-based culture. Global awareness adds another dimension. Westerners now know that billions of people follow other religions with equal devotion. This knowledge raises a simple but devastating question. If people are equally convinced of contradictory faiths, what makes any one of them true? Christianity once relied on isolation to protect itself from comparison. In a globalized world, comparison is unavoidable, and comparison exposes the arbitrariness of belief. Christianity also loses ground because its narrative no longer matches reality. The Bible describes a world of divine intervention, miraculous signs, and clear revelations. The modern world, by contrast, is silent. People notice that miracles never occur under scrutiny, that revelations are absent, and that the heavens are empty. When the stories of the past fail to align with the experiences of the present, faith withers. The concept of God itself has become less compelling. For many, the traditional image of an all-powerful, all-knowing being who demands worship feels childish or authoritarian. People seek a worldview that respects human dignity without demanding submission. The more Christianity insists on absolute obedience to an invisible authority, the less appealing it becomes to minds that value freedom and equality. The pace of decline is also accelerated by the transparency of research into Christianity's origins. Scholars have shown that many of the New Testament writings were authored decades after the events they describe, often by unknown writers. The Gospels contradict each other in key details. Paul, who never met Jesus, shaped much of the theology. These revelations strip away the illusion of reliability. When believers realize that the foundation texts are unstable, the entire structure begins to crumble. Christianity's rituals of confession and guilt have also lost their power. People today are less willing to see themselves as inherently broken or sinful. Instead, they embrace psychology, self-help, and therapy as healthier ways of understanding human imperfection. Religion's focus on guilt feels manipulative, compared to approaches that emphasize growth and healing. Once guilt loses its grip, so does the church. The decline also stems from Christianity's inability to offer coherent answers to the problem of suffering. Natural disasters, genetic diseases, and random accidents claim lives without regard for faith. For centuries, preachers explained these as divine punishment or mysterious tests. But today, people see them as natural events with natural causes. When a child dies of leukemia despite endless prayers, the explanation of divine testing feels cruel rather than comforting. Theodicy, the attempt to justify a good and powerful God in the face of suffering, fails to persuade modern audiences. The more people confront suffering directly through science and social reform, the less they tolerate empty religious justifications. The modern emphasis on mental health further undermines Christianity's grip. Religion often interprets depression, anxiety, or doubt as spiritual weakness, while psychology and psychiatry treat them as medical conditions. People increasingly turn to therapy rather than prayer, to medication rather than confession. Once mental health is understood through science, religious explanations lose relevance. The church's insistence on spiritual remedies in place of medical ones makes it appear outdated and even harmful. Christianity also falters because of its exclusivity. It insists that salvation belongs only to believers, while the rest face eternal punishment. In an interconnected world where people befriend, love, and work alongside those of different beliefs, this claim feels unjust. How can good, moral individuals of other religions, or of no religion, deserve damnation? This exclusivity once reinforced group loyalty, but now it repels people who value fairness and inclusivity. The rise of secular morality plays a decisive role. Ethical frameworks built on empathy, reason, and human well-being do not require divine approval. In fact, many moral advances have come in opposition to church teachings. The abolition of slavery, the recognition of women's equality, and the acceptance of same-sex relationships all emerged despite religious resistance. As people see morality progressing outside religion, they conclude that it is stronger without it. Christianity no longer looks like the guardian of morality, but rather its reluctant follower. Another reason for the decline is the exposure of hypocrisy. Churches preach humility while accumulating wealth, condemn greed while hoarding property, and speak of compassion while covering up abuse. These contradictions are not minor flaws. They reveal a deep gap between words and actions. Hypocrisy destroys trust, and once trust is gone, influence evaporates. In a world of constant media scrutiny, hypocrisy cannot remain hidden, and every scandal accelerates the decline. Christianity is also undermined by its approach to authority. In an age of democracy, equality, and human rights, the church still demands obedience to hierarchies of clergy, dogma, and ancient texts. This clashes with the modern conviction that authority must be questioned and earned. People who value autonomy and critical thinking find it difficult to submit to unquestionable religious power. The very structure of Christianity feels authoritarian in a culture that celebrates freedom. The decline is visible in the realm of family traditions as well. Baptism, confirmation, and church weddings were once social expectations. Now they are optional. Families increasingly choose secular ceremonies or none at all. Without these rites of passage, religion loses its grip on personal identity. A child raised without baptism, without Sunday school, and without religious holidays centered on church life is far less likely to return to the faith as an adult. The chain of tradition is breaking, and once broken, it is rarely restored. One of the most powerful forces driving the decline is simple indifference. For many people, Christianity does not provoke anger or rebellion. It provokes boredom. The sermons feel irrelevant, the rituals repetitive, the doctrines uninspiring. When life offers endless alternatives for community, meaning, and entertainment, religion struggles to compete. Apathy may be quieter than outrage, but it is just as effective in eroding belief. The rise of scientific literacy has reshaped how people think about origins. Evolutionary biology demonstrates that humanity shares common ancestry with all living things. Cosmology traces the universe back to the Big Bang without requiring a creator. Neuroscience shows that thoughts and emotions emerge from the brain rather than the soul. Each of these discoveries erases a function once reserved for God. Christianity thrived when it provided explanations. It declines when science provides better ones. Christianity also suffers from its emphasis on ancient gender roles. The subordination of women, once preached as divine order, now appears unjust. As women gain education, independence, and leadership, they reject institutions that limit their rights. Younger generations, raised with equality as a baseline value, find it especially hard to respect a religion that continues to defend patriarchal structures. The clash between modern gender equality and religious hierarchy widens the gap further each year. The concept of eternal life, once Christianity's greatest promise, also loses appeal. Modern people are more concerned with improving life here and now than with speculating about an afterlife. The promise of heaven feels vague compared to the tangible reality of improving society, relationships, and personal fulfillment. When meaning is found in the present, the distant reward of heaven feels unnecessary. Christianity's central selling point becomes irrelevant to those who value immediacy. Technology plays an even deeper role. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration expand human potential in ways that religion cannot. These advances make divine intervention feel obsolete. When humans create machines that can learn or edit genes to cure disease or plan colonization of other planets, the old narratives of divine control appear increasingly small. Religion shrinks as human capability grows. Christianity also struggles with its historical narratives. Archaeology and historical research often fail to confirm biblical claims. The lack of evidence for events like the Exodus or the global flood raises questions about the reliability of Scripture. When stories presented as history turn out to be myth, the foundation of faith crumbles. A religion based on unverifiable events loses power in a culture that values evidence. Even language of spirituality has shifted. People today talk about mindfulness, wellness, or meditation without reference to God. These practices provide peace, focus, and meaning without requiring belief in miracles. Spirituality has been separated from religion, leaving Christianity to seem rigid while alternative practices thrive. Once the monopoly on spiritual experience is broken, the church loses another pillar of authority. The very success of secular societies weakens Christianity. Countries with high levels of secularism, such as Sweden or the Netherlands, consistently show high levels of happiness, health, and stability. These societies demonstrate that prosperity does not depend on religion. In fact, they often outperform more religious nations in measures of well-being. The success of secular societies provides living evidence that Christianity is unnecessary for flourishing. Generational momentum intensifies the decline. Each generation raised without strong ties to Christianity produces another generation even further removed. The process is not easily reversed because once faith is gone, the infrastructure of belief, rituals, teachings, habits, is gone with it. Christianity cannot simply reappear in a culture where people no longer see the need for it. The loss becomes self-perpetuating. The religion also suffers from its resistance to doubt. In a culture that prizes questioning and exploration, Christianity often portrays doubt as weakness or rebellion. Yet doubt is a natural part of intellectual honesty. By discouraging it, the church alienates thinkers who want to explore freely. Those who embrace doubt often leave, while those who suppress it remain uneasy. A religion that fears questions cannot thrive in an age that celebrates inquiry. Another factor is the rise of global crises that require practical solutions. Climate change, pandemics, and technological disruptions demand scientific expertise and international cooperation, not prayer. When humanity faces challenges of this scale, religious rituals appear powerless. The more people see that progress comes from human action rather than divine intervention, the less they turn to Christianity for answers. The decline is also fueled by the breakdown of exclusivity in art and literature. Once, masterpieces of art and music were tied to Christian themes. Now, creativity flourishes without religious inspiration. Some of the most powerful works of modern culture come from secular or even anti-religious perspectives. When beauty is no longer tied to religion, the church loses one of its strongest attractions. At the personal level, people increasingly see Christianity as incompatible with authenticity. It asks them to deny parts of themselves, to suppress desires, ignore questions, or accept contradictions. Modern culture emphasizes living authentically, embracing one's true identity. When Christianity demands conformity instead of authenticity, it feels oppressive rather than liberating. People leave not only because they reject doctrine, but because they seek integrity. The religion also fails in the face of modern pluralism. In a diverse society, any claim to exclusive truth must withstand scrutiny. Christianity's insistence that it alone holds the path to salvation appears arrogant. In cultures that value inclusivity, such claims are offensive rather than inspiring. Exclusivity, once a source of loyalty, becomes a reason for abandonment. One of the final and perhaps most powerful reasons for Christianity's decline is its loss of mystery. For centuries, the church thrived on awe. Grand cathedrals, Latin rituals, incense, and sacred silence. But as rituals were simplified and doctrines rationalized, much of the mystery disappeared. Without awe, religion feels ordinary, and ordinary institutions cannot compete with the richness of secular life. Once mystery is gone, what remains is bureaucracy, and bureaucracy rarely inspires devotion. In the end, Christianity is losing ground in the West because the conditions that sustained it no longer exist. Fear has faded, authority has weakened, knowledge has spread, diversity has flourished, and alternatives have multiplied. The religion built on submission now faces cultures built on choice. The decline is not the result of one cause, but of many converging forces: historical, cultural, scientific, and personal. Together, they form a tide that the church cannot reverse. The West is not rejecting meaning or morality. It is rejecting institutions that fail to provide them. People are not walking away from community or purpose. They are building them in new ways. Christianity had its age of dominance, but that age is ending. In its place rises a world where meaning is chosen, not imposed, where morality is reasoned, not commanded, and where the search for truth no longer begins in the pews, but in the open world of human experience.